Hello, you're back with Dave and Tim at a Single Malt Review, and we have the great pleasure today of bringing you some local flavour, thanks to the good folks at Waiheke Whisky.
Yes, indeed. We've always championed the cause of local whisky. It's the only thing that's going to save us from the scarcity, the paucity of the traditional distilling locations. And the people at Waiheke Whisky have been very, very good as to send us their tasting pack of their peated selection. So we're going to rip into this one and go through the whole lot for you.
And this distillery is founded in 2010 on Waiheke Island, the larger of the islands off the coast of Auckland, our largest city. We're at the north end of the country. It's a lovely warm climate, so it produces some quite fast maturing whisky.
Yeah, New Zealand is well, go figure, it is an island, but it's quite a long island, so our climate changes pretty dramatically as you go north or south. And we are, as we sit here in a room with, I think, the heater on for an unprecedented first time ever here for an episode, we're in the cold bit, we're down south. Waiheke is a much more tropical northern bit, and they have a very, very different climate, which ages very, very different in terms of the scale of whisky. So we're going to try what they've got here. This is all peated. This is their peated selection, and it is peated with New Zealand peat, which is really going to be fascinating. This is not the cheat. This is not cheap peat. This is not a Port Ellen maltings sort of shipment of Isla peated malt that's come down, as is so often the case. This is all New Zealand good stuff. It is made by Gladfields Maltings, which is the big maltings down here in the South Island in Canterbury. Canterbury grown malt. What we're going to start with, and you know it's a good tasting pack when A, I can't get the bottle out. Oh, here it comes. And B, possibly even more importantly, they've included the new make. Yeah. This is what the Scottish producers will not let you see. So we're going to start on that number there, and that will tell us so much about the nature of the spirit than we would normally be able to discern.
It's 45% ABV, a nice hearty offering.
And I can reference their rather lovely tasting panel here, which has some of the most granular information I have seen about a whisky. I think just about ever. We've got information here such as the distillation and bottling date. Funny enough, the same year for this one, being new make spirit. We have the strain of yeast used, the DY 582 distiller's yeast, presumably a common one. We've got the gravity of the wort. We've got the wash ABV of the wort. We've got how long it took to ferment, which in this case was 3.5 days, which is almost twice as long as a standard sort of big mega commercial ferment.
Well, one of the key figures in Waiheke Whisky's founding was a brewer from one of New Zealand's major breweries. So good beer making background, perfect for brewing up the wort for whisky making. So Waiheke is home to a number of vineyards as well, so the distillery has the pleasure of being able to source a lot of their maturation barrels very locally, like from the same island. Otherwise, it's a mixture of virgin oak, not for any of the peated offerings, but for their unpeated selection, and also exit bourbon as well. And then a few Australian wine casks as well, like some Apera casks. We've mentioned those before, basically Australian sherry.
Yeah, so they are standing in for the sort of the sherry casks, as you would, but the it's pretty analogous in terms of its character, and so I'm sure it's going to bring a lot of the same stuff along. This one, however, this one's nothing but the spirit. So this one is going to tell us where the whisky begins.
There's a nice smokiness on the nose. It's like a very clean single malt vodka. So we have tried New Zealand single malt vodka many years ago, Cardrona's, Reed I believe it is, but that's beside the point. So we have a new make malt spirit. Oh, a slightly smoky peat.
There's two things I look for.
Slightly cold smoky, rather.
Two things I look for in new make, and the first one is the fruit, and we've definitely got some fruit here. And the second one, in the case of the peat, is you don't so much have to look for it because it's going to find you. Peat is going to make itself known, but being able to nose the peat in its purest form is valuable, and it will be valuable going forward in this pack because this is New Zealand peat. This is a world away from Islay, from mainland Scotland, from anywhere peat is typically harvested to make typical whisky. And the ecology, particularly the historic ecology of New Zealand versus Scotland, could not be more different. New Zealand is I suppose, historically, it's very, very locked in time, preserved, a very, very ecologically primitive zone in terms of its flora and fauna.
Yeah, it's a subtropical rainforest, technically. So lots of fast-growing, small leafy plants.
Mm-hmm. And we have, and this is where it really starts to influence the peat, we don't have as many hardwoods to form the peat as they do in Europe, particularly in Islay. And all our peat here is largely constrained to the mainland. Not that we have much of a mainland being a little skinny island, but in terms of its character, there's less of a marine influence. So there's less tang and there's less of that sort of very, very characterful wood smoke coming through. And so what we get is something very, very soft, and
there's a little bit
you can really tell. Softer, more fragrant, because it's made of bog plants, really. So yeah, and what will be really interesting will be how this manifests in more mature whiskey, but we'll see it in its initial phase here, which is pretty delicate.
Ooh, I've had new make before, including New Zealand new make, but this is the smoothest and most drinkable of the lot. It is like it's like a very good vodka. Only with the delicious peat on there. That is a very tasty peat.
It's very, very sweet. It's very, very lush.
Yeah,
new make.
Absolutely. Now add the smallest smidge of water. Probably doesn't need it, but I think science demands.
I'm trying to summarise how the peat... trying to do the one-sentence description of what New Zealand peat tastes like, because this is really my first brush with it. So
it's making me think of Manuka smoked salmon. Manuka wood, famous New Zealand plant, used in honey and all sorts. Well, the flowers are, but it is very good for smoking food, especially fish. And it's a similar kind of, it's a slightly sweet smokiness, a little hint of coal, just some good wood char. It's a genuinely tasty peat. It's hard to describe it otherwise.
It's much more mild, and it's mild such that it is blending in with the more spirit-driven, less peat-driven flavours. There's a real sort of bog myrtle element here, a slightly lemon balmy quality to both the nose and the palate. But the smoke is suitably gentle that it's kind of weaving in, which is making it kind of hard to nail down. So I think the really primary differences here between New Zealand peat and Scottish peat, Islay peat particularly, is there's a lack of tang and there's a lack of that really barbecuey smoke. Yes. It's more of a down here rather than up here. There's more of a sort of more fragrant fug going on.
Yeah, there's none of the grubby, salty oiliness.
Yeah, and beyond that, there is a tremendously sort of there's a really good clarity of fruit flavour here and a tremendous sweetness coming through from the new make.
Yeah.
We won't really know how this manifests in the older whiskey until we try it, so we're going to move straight into that one, and we will be right back with, I think it's moss. It might be moss. We're going to find out. I might be wrong, but hey, who knows?